Peace, human families of the planet Earth. I am your host, Aseer the Duke of Tears, along with my co-host, Selena the Empress of 10,000 Years. Together, collectively, we are Team Cordoba, along hosting Super Heru Radio for the past, 6.5 years now, seem like. Also, peace to Saga Assad, who's been our quiet co-host since the beginning. Inshallah, everybody hears me loud and clear. And here we go. I'm going to be checking into the chat room periodically to make sure that everything is copacetic in terms of the hearing. So, inshallah, please let me know if the levels or things like that go out, because they seem to have our fiber optics made out of sandpaper for some reason. However, one monkey don't stop no show, and we just want to make sure everything is all good. Thank you again. Nah, it's so far so good. So again, internationally we're dealing with a lot of backpedaling and fast moving towards a crescendo act in what they prefer as the closing drama in the so-called Middle East with this Iran thing that is working in conjunction with this Obamacare thing that nobody can access. So what this means essentially is that the healthcare system in the United States cannot move progressively forward due to the impactful nature of what they call outward transparent diplomacy, which is you seemingly are transparent, but really you're just lying about everything. So because the new model is we can't trust you, that has become the mantra that the so-called elite are using to turn everybody against this dude to bring his approval rating, or what they call the approval rating, down to below 6%, which then would allow them to initiate next-level protocols in terms of more false flag operations and things like that. So because false flag operations have become part of the status quo of how Washington does business, the faction within the faction of the government that actually controls those things work in tandem with those factions of the government that work in what we would consider the ritual sacrifice department. Like how they want to, or how the stars and astrology is used to engender certain psychic resonance based upon mythical occurrences reenacted unknowingly by the participants at play. This has been going on since the time of Caesar, but due to our nation's preponderance to enjoy the luxuries that were given by our quote-unquote European Morisco Franciscan cousins, we flip them into a system of ritualistic control based upon allodium and title, and false entitlement based upon the denaturalization and then the former naturalization into an inferior position. The inferior position being that of a second-class citizen erroneously placed under the designation of Negro, which is a 14th Amendment designation that denotes a contraband form of property. That was illegally measured and given unto the descendants of the original Confederates of the original Confederacy, comprised of the remnants of the Societas Republicae Americanos Estados, which loosely translates into the Americanos Republican Empire of States. Now it's too loud. So it becomes a situation where we create a level of discontinuance. Thank you, Dave. Discontinuance of legacy, which leaves our people open for conjecture or for whatever false history is laid on top of that. So the bottom line is that you're not African, just like I'm not. In the context of being from a place in the world called Africa, there was a designation for a place called Africa referred to as North Africa, but we understand North Africa as being northwest, southwest of Mexum, a.k.a. America. Therefore, when we say North Africa, we're really talking about America. Only because the term Africa in that context means the farthest west, or from the old Canaanite word apar, also called afar, A-P-H-A-R, Afarica, right? But back then, due to the reconstruction of the Orient, meaning of how we understood our society as it was oriented as a society, everything is turned upside down and we function under a different time period. So the decline of our particular country, empire, or dominion, or whatever you want to call it, fell around or within the sphere of 836 BC to 1196 BC. So BC represents basically, let's say, before or let's say before Carthage, let's say, right? Or the time before what we consider as modern history is brought to us in the form of so-called Romance culture. The equivalent number to that in this society would be 1416 to 1776. Both of those add up to about 360 years, coincidentally. So 360 and 360 is 720. And 720 is the sphere of what they call the Moorish Master Mason. That's the level that people like C.M. Bay and them have reached in terms of being able to circumscribe and circumnavigate the globe metaphysically. That would then mean that if we were going by our own calendar, we would be in something like 1433 right now. That is if we're going again from the presumption that our calendar was never impeded. You got to remember, their calendar is based on the birth of Christ, but remember, you're a Muslim. So the Nation of Islam has no birth record. The Nation of Islam has no set birth record. Therefore, there is no beginning of Allah. There never was a time when man was not. Because if there was, then there would be a time that Allah was not, because Allah is within the heart or the soul of man. Therefore, the learned man or the upright noble is Allah manifest. Therefore, out of the triple stage darkness came the archetype that would be the eternal archetype of what we consider high sentient life to be. When you think about something that is sentient, that has a form of being or intellect, you, for whatever reason, tend to view it in whatever mode, but it tends to have an arm, leg, arm, head. Therefore, that particular archetype or form is the boundless form and the eternal form or the infallible form of the Most High. Therefore, whatever that form first congealed and condensed in was the archetype or prototype of all the other forms that came after. So if you ask an African today where they're from, they don't call themselves Africans. They call themselves Senegalese or Kenyan or Ethiopian or whatever they call themselves on that continent. See what I'm saying? They only start using that term and stuff like that when they come over here, because all Africans know that term African is a way to get bread. Everybody know that. Why? Why is it like that? Why was black people over here rocking the afros and the dashikis, but none of those dashikis was made in Africa? Why was they able to do that? Well, there's a book you can get called White Money, Black Power. And in that book, it says on the 4th chapter, Black Studies in White and Black, the Ford Foundation funds Black Studies. Given the public outcry over Ford's involvement in Black Power, as the foundation prepared to award the first round of grants to Black Studies programs, it no longer wished to support a fund proposal that advocated any type of militancy. Wait, matter of fact, let me go back. Let me see if I got the argument. So, what is the Ford Foundation funding Black Power organizations? What is it about? Anybody ever heard that before? In place of mass movements, foundations support litigation. Litigation does not entail mass mobilization. It's a safe, conservative outlet for activists. So, in the later 1960s, as the upsurge began among blacks and other minorities, foundations multiplied public litigation organizations and created what they call Rolfe's Lists 23, which created and virtually sustained by the Ford Foundation between 1967 and 1975. In 1970 alone, foundations channeled at least $15.6 million to the right type of black organizations. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference organization first received funds, but when Martin Luther King Jr. took it to the more militant path, emphasized the common interests of poor black and white people post the Vietnam War, the funding declined. After his assassination, his memory was promptly sanitized. The Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change was established in Atlanta with the foundation and corporate funds. The U.S. ruling class was alarmed by the slogan of Black Power, first used by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. During the 1960s, the Ford and Rockefeller Foundations responded by creating the National Urban Coalition to transform black power into black capitalism. And the Congress of Racial Equality was named a Ford Foundation Fellow, and he became a board member of the NUC, the NUC, and the CORE, the National Urban Coalition, and supported community development corporations, CDCs, right, to establish small businesses and industries in depressed areas. Bedford-Stuyvesant in New York had witnessed the radical mobilization for youth and the community action movement in 1964 with the uprising against police atrocities. Ford's answer was the Bedford-Stuyvesant Restoration Center, right? Corporation, BSRC, which promoted small businesses in the area. Thomas later became the first black president of the Ford Foundation Corporations, and the foundation invests millions in CDCs, which have contributed to ghetto pacification and the development of moderate leadership and ultimate gentrification of the same neighborhoods. So again, this is how you can have a person, you can have a man working for the Department of Homeland Security, and then by day and then by night he has like a website where he's calling for the killing and the burning of white people and blowing them up and killing them and all of this other type of stuff. You know what I'm saying? What the initial core group may have set out to do, what Huey and them set out to do, what Fred Hampton and them to do. Remember, Fred Hampton, Huey, Bunchy Carter, they gone. They're not here. The ones that was left was the ones that was caught up in the other stuff. You know what I'm And that created a culture of pacification and duplicitousness amongst the so-called black consciousness movement that seeped even into our generation, where we are now the product that grew up dealing with grew up in the inner cities, growing up under all the conflicting ideologies that had a core basis in truth of empowerment, which is what ascribed us and attracted us to them in the first place. But due to the overabundance of self-aggrandizement in these organizations and the ultimate defacing of women, or the stealing of money, the adultery aspect, the whole cult aspect of these things, this is what turned people off from trying to really get right. And what that does is it puts a stall on the generational view until another generation can come and work out and try to move forward. But we live in a time where a lot of the elders in the situation, not trying to speak about anybody in particular, but just in general, created a climate of disharmony for us all to kind of witness and grow up in, which now has manifested into a thing where brothers and sisters no longer wish to dialogue and build on and try to come to higher understandings about their own thing. They'd rather just debate and go on and meander and get famous on that. Like that's what it's devolved to. And what's unfortunate is that most of the people involved in that know that that's what they devolved it to. They know. They know that they're not there to contribute anything real in terms of a solution. All the solutions are half-baked. Illusions, you know what I'm saying, based on wishful thinking, you know what I mean? And most of those situations bring you into a context back into the United States in a manner that is sometimes worse than it was prior to you even coming into this. The time that it takes to build up a reputation and to build up something that is of merit in the world is something that in this fast food culture can get broken down in like a second. You know what I mean? Based upon people's willingness not to invest in anything of merit for fear that they may lose it. Why do they feel like that? Because everybody that they cared about 2 generations, 3 generations before this, they popped off. They capped in the head. They killed all these niggas. They brought these niggas in at the beginning of the decade, and then by the close of the decade, anybody that was of merit that they thought was whatever, who was really down with them, you know what I'm saying, which is also why they got it. But at the same time, whatever good they could have done, we'll never know, because once they fulfill their purpose, boom, they out. And that created a system of, I can't get too invested, because just when I think I might get free, they might pull an Oswald on me. They killed the killer of the alleged killer on TV. You dig what I'm saying? Forget black people. At that point, white people should have went into revolt. When that shit went down like that, that whole candy shit, with them white people talking all this shit about liberty and what they say, liberty and honor, right? The American way. We got to keep our borders strong, right? All of that. They popped this man right in front of them, and he was white. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, white people, they always find another reason to hate on you, even when you're white. They say, oh, well, he was white, but he was Catholic. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? Do dumb shit like that, like, oh, well, he was Catholic, so he wasn't really white. What do you mean? He was white yesterday. He was white when he made him president. He was white when he was doing what he was doing when he was white. Oh, but he was Irish. Well, yeah, but so are you. So is Andrew Jackson. Y'all made him president too. Oh, well, yeah, we had to get him out. Why? Oh, well, you know. Oh, it's because he founded the anti-Masonic party? That's what got him in there. Oh, well, you know, we didn't like that. There's always something with the United States, and that's what's funny about them. They again, they'll pop their own leader. This is how crazy these people are. When they said we're gonna follow Rome, they wasn't playing. They said, look, if any one of these niggas get too crazy, we're gonna have to pop them. So what we're gonna do, we're gonna set up a system of checks and balances and get them caught up in like sexual deviancy and stuff like that, so we could always keep a track on them. And then if they get too much because they got a family and an image, we could always bring them back in. And then if that don't work, we could always, Boston break them or take them take them for a drive down to the lake, or you know what I'm saying? One of the things they do, or take the Johnson rod out of the plane. Whatever they do, they always doing something, and that's what I mean. That's when you're not dealing with a government. That's not a government. That is called a cabal. That's a group of people who really don't have any name. They really don't, because you really can't even boil it down to one person anymore. I'm of the opinion that the thing is just running, where these niggas think they controlling it, but the thing is actually just controlling them. Everybody thinks they in control, but nobody's controlling nothing. So everything is just kind of running on autopilot because everybody assumes that somebody's in control of it. It's an assumption because everybody's trying to cut each other's throat to be the foreman of Slavery Incorporated. Nobody wants to really slow down and be like, well, maybe there's another aspect of this we're not looking at, like the fact that all we got to really do to get rid of the national debt is to agree to allow the general or national government to reconvene. And then they can just admonish in the first act and create a clean, free bill of health for everybody. Because really, only they can do it, because they're the only ones that are Americans. You understand? Only Americans are the people who aren't citizens of the United States. Once you become a citizen of the United States, you're no longer an American. You're no longer. When you were born in Chile and you came to the United States, it wasn't until you were naturalized that you stopped being an American. Once you get naturalized into the United States, they're naturalizing you into their version of America, you see, which is the United States. But that's not America. That's the United States version of what America is, because the president is not the president of the United States. He is the administrative president of the office of the presidency of the United States of America under Title 28. So he's not really even the guy running the country. He can't, because he's not really the president. He's the administrative president, meaning that he's just there to make sure that the actual administrative day-to-day stuff in the government goes down. But they saying he don't even do that. So who's running it? What's going on? Nobody. Nobody's running it. It's running itself. So when you see these YouTube clips about aliens, and in the background and on his back and sewn in his head, all of that, like all of that, whether it's true or not, bears no relevance in the fact that nobody's running this thing. That this thing is basically on autopilot because they don't have the ability to stop it anymore. They are actually at war, shooting, killing each other. But because there's different levels of international diplomacy going on, everybody's trying to make their own deal. So everybody's like, I'll support you so long as you don't do this so long as you don't do that. And we'll all kind of keep you in place so long as you keep them Negroes under control. That's a great question. I just saw somebody say, well, if we're not Africans, but we on a certain level, then why don't we just build? Because the people who come over here and become Africans create their own community. You know what I'm saying? Like the Senegalese got their own community. You know what I mean? The Somali got their own community. The Ethiopians, they got their own community. You know what I'm saying? So it's a thing where, though we don't speak none of them languages, the average so-called black man. Also, there's also a perception of Africans always selling African-American stuff, meaning that we don't have a culture of, let's say, equality where, like, the Africans is getting something from us other than, like, hip-hop and like, fashion sense. We're always buying stuff from them, incense, socks, you know, phone chargers, whatever it is. So it's a certain disconnect when it comes to what we perceive as equality in the hood. It's not really like that. Our Africans open up businesses and stuff like that. West Indians, they'll do that, whereas African so-called Americans, they don't really do stuff like that. They don't open businesses. This don't mean they can't, but it mean that it's a little different. They don't have no flag. That's the problem. So, like I said, you know, that's going down. So we already submitted the fact that this book basically tells us, given the public outcry of Ford's involvement with the Black Power as the foundation prepared to award the first round of grants to the Black Studies program. It no longer wished for the support of funds proposals advocated to any type of militancy. Accordingly, the relationship of money to power and power to race could not have been more different as Ford moved from one strategy to the next. During an earlier period, Bundy believed that Black power was an understandable form of Black anger that Ford could support in to strengthening Black communities and helping them achieve racial parity. However, in 1969, he believed that Black Studies was a tool that led to heightened levels of racial understanding and acceptance on the part of whites. There was no longer any room in this thinking for Black separatism, anger, or militancy. While Ford's motivation for its union with Black power advocates in 1968 was an attempt to build a new pathway leading directly to interracial cooperation, and outcome exposed the pitfalls of the approach. If some Black study proponents had the desire to transform American institutions of higher education, Ford Foundation saw itself as a transformative in another regard. The Foundation's choices regarding to the types of programs and institutionalizing structures it would support had far-ranging consequences for the future of Black studies as well as racial interaction on campuses. Basically, they're saying that the Ford Foundation, or Ford, was the father of African studies, because what they decided to do was create a system of integration by which white people would be forced to deal with Black studies coming from Black people, but it wouldn't be in an integrated setting. It would be one Black teacher in a whole class full of white kids, and then it would be a white teacher in a whole class full of Black kids. You see what I'm saying? But the white teacher would be teaching them about white history, and the Black teacher would be teaching them about Black history. But the kids would not get their own true history from either one. So that becomes the basis of a lot of the angst and anger of white people. You notice it said that they came up with the agreement in 1968. By the next year, 69, they had killed everybody that was party to the agreement. Whitney Young was dead. Harold Washington was dead. Martin Luther King was dead. Medgar Evers was dead. You know what I'm saying? Peace. You know what I'm saying? All these niggas is dead. Popped them all. All of the pawns. Because it was the end of that age. The white man, or the person, the being that they refer to, and look at the end of every decade as the end of an age, fam. That's another thing we don't understand. Like I told you, the time difference between us is very drastic, yet it's so equivalent that it functions on a similar sphere. So either you're in 1433 or you in 2013. You see what I'm saying? But you in 1433 whether you realize it or not, because your ancestry still do. That means that essentially a certain amount of years had to be added. Think about it. If the chattel slavery started in 1779 and ended in 1865, that means that they were perpetually putting us in this chattel period for 85 years. So it was an 85-year period of constant integration and constant breaking in of this new modality of who we were here. The Yamasee Empire existed in this place for a long time. But they want you to believe that the Yamasees came from slaves, for instance, just using them as an example of a noble people put in so-called bondage, right? But when you really do the knowledge, they didn't fall into bondage to no white men. This is from a book on the Aboriginals of America. I think he locates the Yamasee on page 112. I think he locates the Yamasee dash, which means they're leaving something out. Meaning Yamasee more. I write from memory dash in the middle of the eastern portion of Florida. He says they were occupying the country when the Creeks came. Described the Yamasees as having dark skins, coarse hair, thick lips, and flat feet, and having inferior implements of war to the Creeks. The Creeks were more from the north, who were being pushed out due to the Pequot Wars, which broke up the original Kituwa society. A war of extermination was waged by the Creeks against the Yamasees, and finally at Tallahassee, Tal-Allah-Ase, or Hase, the last of the warriors were killed, dash. But about 1,000 of the young Creek warriors took sweethearts among the Yamasee girls and saved them from death. According to the law among the Creeks, they was required to remain out of the nation for a year of purification. Before the end of the year, the young warriors concluded to make wives of the Yamasee girls and set up as a nation for themselves, which they did. The Creeks called this nation the Seminoles. Now, the history you grew up and I grew up learning about the Seminoles was that they was named the Seminoles because the white man enslaved them. Seminole means something about being a slave, right? That's what they told us. But this say that the word Seminole was actually a Creek word for the nation that came out of the union, that came out of the war between the Creeks and the Yamasee. They were afterwards joined by the outlaws and runaways from all other nations and soon became a formidable nation, as Uncle Sam knows. So again, this is another misconception of us coming into these people nation when it's really inter-nation business and tribal infractions that manifested out of us losing a core identity. And there's an undercurrent that's going down where they want us to be on some straight Arab Muslim steez. Like we're some sort of Arab. Like the Prophet or what we are as Moors as a distinction, as a distinct identity from everybody else is somehow not real. Like we're supposed to just be with everybody else. And we're the only people on earth that they do that to. American people are so racist or racially identifiable, or American people are so into racial identifying that when they see an Asian, right, they don't get into what type of Asian he is or whatever. They automatically call him a Chinaman or Japanese. It's either one or the other. They don't even get into Korean or Cantonese or Mandarin. They don't do that. They either deal with one or the other, because with those are the two nations that they had the most conflict with. Because the so-called Caucasian European only deals with nations or looks at nations that he has conflict with as being, or nations that he has conflict with as actually being real nations. Henry Kissinger changed American foreign policy, United States foreign policy forever. And the evidence of that are all of the bases that exist in throughout the world that are belonging to the United States, but these are not necessarily American embassies in the traditional sense of the historic America. In order for that to happen, we would have to be under the de jure aspect of what America is. But that don't exist without us. So everything is being done in the name of. You see what I'm saying? Not the spirit of. So the disharmony and the stuff that we see as a disconnect in our own community is coming from the fact that we don't understand the premise of where we are, because our identity is always latched on to somebody else's identity. Your identity, for whatever reason, is always linked up to something like slavery. You dig what I'm saying? They'll make 1,000 movies about slavery. You know what I'm saying? And they'll continue to do it. And how they flip it on you is that they actually get Africans to play the slaves. But they told you that you was the so-called slave. So how is it that the main roles in the slave movie of Slaves in America is about Americans, is about Africans? I thought it was African Americans that were slaves. But then again, at the time, there was no such thing as African Americans, right? But regardless of the confusion about that, we know that the white man was the one enslaving them, right? We're talking about the systematic disenfranchisement of a people from themselves to such a degree that they began to even lose what place or position they held in the country of their birth. Now, it's in the saute. I'm the winner all day. In Black's law, there's a term called an adeling or an aceling. An adeling or an aceling or an asling is a noble who is excellent and is a title of honor among the Saxons, or any property belonging to the king's children. Therefore, this is why a child can be put on the throne, you see what I'm saying? And the title of aceling or adeling or sultan or whatever it is you ascribe to the child is vested in it. And then the custodian is the one who is over the child. That very premise is the premise that they're essentially running on all of the Moors here in America, who, for whatever reason, choose not to associate themselves with that understanding. And to some degree, I can understand, due to the huge amount of confusion coming from inside the temple, outside the temple, agitation from people who have no association or are really Moors in that pure sense. It can be very frustrating. Anybody dealing with this and striving to deal with this on the real for more than 3 years, I take my hat off to you. Because it's not easy. But when you know what you know, it's hard for you to go back to being something else. So I ain't never seen, when I see images of Moors, I see a certain distinct way of being. You know what I mean? Or even when I read about how we are or how Moors carry themselves, there's a distinct way of being that's different from an Arab or anybody else. I can't be a descendant of Hagar because I'm a descendant of Sarah. Therefore, as a Saracen, I have a different genetic history. Although we are distant cousins, we are nothing in the modern sense alike, because when I was lawless, I was still under love, truth, peace, freedom, justice, and equality. These people are lawless today under some form of brutalistic Babylon mystery Islam that is forcing them to enslave people who call themselves Ethiopians. But I know Moors that went over there and then build with them, and they ain't treat them like that. So is what you know. There's no treaties that really protect Negroes like that. The ones that do still put them under the jurisdiction of whoever's protecting them. There's a term that they have that goes ad tristem partem strenua est suspicio, which means the suspicion lies heavy on the unfortunate side. You know what I'm saying? And that's the realm of matter that these people exist in. They exist on a perpetual unfortunate side. So what they do is they flip the deck on you, and they get their operatives that look like you to push agendas to you that really are not your own. And we're never really a part of your agenda. We never in any antiquity. I mean, people talk about Moorish science not real. We ain't never practiced Kwanzaa. That didn't exist until what's his name? Karanga came and created that, and allegedly he was a CIA operative. So does that mean that everybody that's celebrating Kwanzaa is a CIA operative? No. But it is to say that that wasn't something that was created strictly on the strength of us as black people having an ancestral custom that we passed down. This was something to mirror Kwanzaa. So really then it's a fiction created by the JDL or the B'nai B'rith or the ACLU or whatever other organization that NAACP that's used to monitor black people. That's just what it is. So the realm that we followers of truth, men of Allah, we are striving to associate ourselves with that which we can connect to, but still be operative for us today. There was another book I was reading where passage it said, in hindsight, the proclamation that the diasporic Africans were Moors was a revolutionary break from the vague designations as Negro-colored, Negro-Saxons terms prevalent in those times. The term Moor connects Africans with an important civilization. Even today, Moorish history is rarely taught or emphasized in spite of the fact that the European Renaissance was founded upon it. The word Moor, as well as Kemet, Shabazz, Zulu, etc., is a power key that unlocks the missing links in the Africans' contribution to civilization. The Moors, as well as the Yorubas, of the West Africans were. The West Africans, you see, Americans, Moors, among others, significant heirs of Egypt, the root of civilization, right? This is why the prophet was called the Egyptian adept. Space purpose does not allow for us to exhaust the depth of Moorish scientism. Rather, now we want to focus on the particular ideas that we have influenced on the development and what became Islam, which is then a whole nother thing. So again, being a Bey and an Eel puts you back in the family line of those who brought forth and co-signed the Quran, the Constitution of 622 BC, See, remember, they got us thinking that that time started with the Gregorian calendar with the birth of Christ. But remember, the advent of Islam started way before even 711 AD. So by the time the religion of Islam was founded, the life culture had already existed from time immemorial. So if Muhammad was on the run, peace be upon him, if he was on the run like the stories say, then who was the people that actually backed him up when he went to Medina to actually set up the Constitution, the first Islamic state? Who gave him the power to do that? It was the Bayat Eel. It was the house of Al-Bayat or Al-Bayat. Verily Allah has decreed to purify you, O Al-Bayat, and sanctify you in a perfect way. From the Surah Azab, Quran 33:33. I bequeath to you most precious matters. They are the book of Allah, as a cord extended from heaven to earth. My Itra, family, Alu Bayat, Hadith Allah. That is us. That's the Beys and the Eels. They are the decreed that, and they were so-called Abyssinians, remember? His father, Abdullah, was allegedly Abyssinian, but Abdullah was not Christian. Al-Bayat is the Arabic phrase literally meaning people of the house or the family of the house. The phrase Al-Bayat or Bayat was used in Arabia before the advent of Islam to refer to one's clan. It would be adopted by the ruling family of the tribe within the Islamic tradition. It refers to the family of the Islamic prophet Muhammad. It was the Moors, the Eels and the Beys. So when they tell you that nobody was using Eel and Bey before that, that's not true. This is an ancient title of nobility that has nothing to do with the people that's trying to act like it ain't real. Right? So as a two-clan moiety are an aristocracy amongst ourselves. That's why we call each other God and Son and Queen and all of that. We ain't just doing it because that's what we always was doing. But there was one time we was doing it where we was actually in control of everything. So imagine having a mind state of consciousness as the more stuff you have now, but being able to run a fleet or run an army or command a legion. You understand? In 1 Samuel 13:2, it said, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul Nash. Right? Now do the nines to that. That's 32,000, right? Now this is from an FBI report that talks about the original members of the original regular temple, the original organization, and a number. He advised that it was merely as a matter of policy that the regular meetings had been discontinued, but would not elaborate on the real reason for the discontinuance of the meetings. He stated that at the time the regular organization meetings were continued in 1930, the Moorish Science Temple of America had 32,000 enrolled members. What does it say in Samuel 13:2? Saul chose with him 3,000 men, whereof 2,000 was with Saul in Michmash. That's 32,000. So this again is about the bays and the eel. And then in Mount Bayit eel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent to every man to his tent. Every man to his tent means everybody is doing what they need to do in terms of self, meaning that they're not to, for instance, I'll tell you, it says it right here in the FBI report that bears witness to the scripture. He advised that it would be merely a matter of policy that the regular meetings had been discontinued, but not, boom. Oh, yeah. And since 1930, no meetings have been held, and it is the present policy of the organization to hold no meetings and their work is to be carried on individually, in every man in his own tent. More science is real, man. You understand? This is bear witnessing to the fact that there was a regular organization that existed up to a point, and then there was a changeover. And we have been living in a changeover ever since. But Moors don't really want you to do the knowledge to that, because then you will want to get it straight. This is from another book that talks about how things was flipped in colored people. Magistrates to consider any evening meeting of colored people a disorderly gathering, whose participants could be arrested on sight. It is not necessary to go into the details of the legislature state by state. While it is varied in different states, the spirit and tendency already cited animated them all. It showed to be constantly remembered that these unjust laws were enacted before the coming of the carpetbag rule, and they were therefore without the excuse which the form of government was supposed to warrant. It has been frequently intimated, if not asserted, that the South was exasperated by having Negro suffrage forced on that section. But such is not the case. At the time, no tangible proposition of this sort having behind it any considerable public opinion been suggested, probably as an extreme and radical a man, that House of Representatives was Thaddeus Stevens, a Pennsylvanian. On 18th of December, 1865, Mr. Stevens formally opened the debate on the Reconstruction in the House. In this speech, it was only a tentative reference to full manhood suffrage. The most radical utterance on the subject in this speech was a clear-cut statement that the Negroes without votes should not be in the basis of congressional representation in the South. This, in fact, becomes the bedrock test in the reconstruction of the rebellious states. There was much debate during the succeeding months, and not a little legislation had for its outcome. They eventually tried it, and that's what eventually led to them being able to flip Jim Crow, which only existed on the land. But everybody that was a Negro or colored was on a boat. They weren't real. They were beyond the sea, absent of themselves. Therefore, they were still property as contraband because they were stateless. Because the Freedmen Bureau was supposed to set them back to their own national government, and then eventually they would go back to being Moors and stuff. That didn't happen. The Christian preacher pulled them the other way and found to get them embroiled in the next war that they was brewing against the so-called last of the Aboriginals and the natives. So again, it says in Scripture that we are the Eels and Bays, the house of God, or the seat of worship. And that Ephraim, which is in the border of Benjamin, again, is Benjamin meaning the son of, and Ephraim being double truth. You know what I'm saying? These titles, Baron, Princess, all of these are variant titles that come from that, but the original just sanguineous, or the Sangreal, has to be that of the Be'er, together called Baal or Baal, like Be'er root, for instance. It's okay. It says here. Okay. So when we think about people historically like Alexander the Great, we cannot think about what they call a Caucasian person just the same way you wouldn't think of a Caucasian person when you think of the real Saint Nick. You know what I mean? You're thinking about somebody that's from what was now Turkey, but even back then was part of the Osmanli Empire. And these people was dark. Same thing with Alexander the Great, because Alexander the Great was a Macedonian. And Macedon's king, Philip, was in league Hannibal and the Carthaginians, which means, again, that the tactics that Alexander was using was tactics that they were using to bring back in balance and bring these, followed by Hannibal. So you have to understand, when you think of Rome now, you got to think of a society that's a culmination of Moors from over here, Moors from so-called over there, and then those people from the Far East, like in Dravidian India, places like that, as well as remnants of China and Japan, all in the sphere of trade and commerce, all centered around places like Grenada, Baghdad, you know what I'm saying? And then over here, South America, you know what I mean? And some of the kingdoms they don't talk about over here like anymore as actually being trade kingdoms, like old Carthage. All of that stuff is over here. To this day, I think there's a Carthage, South Carolina. You got the name of all of these ancient places here, but everyone believes that they just named this. Oh, when they came here, they didn't know nothing, so they just named it after that. Like, nah, man, we got it twisted. Yeah, see this? Treaty concluded between Hannibal, the general of the Carthaginians, and Philip, king of the Macedonia, 4th year of the Second Punic War, 215 B.C. This is the treaty which Hannibal the general, Mago, who was his brother, Micran, Barmokar, that's his brother too, is Hamilcar, and all the senators of Carthage that were with him, and all of the senators that were in the army with him, have sworn with Theophanes, son of Cleomachus, ambassador deputy to King Philip, son of Demetrius, in his own name. See that? In his own name, and in the name of the Macedonians and their allies. So in the presence of Jupiter, Juno, and Apollo. So that's Asar, Aset, Heru. In the presence of the deity of the Carthaginians, and of Hercules and Elaus. In the presence of Mars, Triton, Poseidon. In the presence of the gods who are with us in the camp and in the sun, moon, and the stars, and the earth, Islam. In the presence of the rivers, the lakes, the waters. In the presence of all the gods who preside over the state of Carthage. In the presence of all the gods who preside over the Macedonian army and the rest of Greece. In the presence of all the gods who direct the affairs of war, who are witnesses to this faith. Hannibal and the general and all the senators of Carthage that are with him, and all the Carthaginians that are in the army with him, have said that they consent to you and of us. This is the treaty of amity and in concord would connect us together as friends, as kindred, as brothers, upon the following condition. And this is then where King Philip of Macedon pledges that him and his son would do the bidding and help preserve the boundaries of Carthage. So when we're talking about Alexander the Great and his conquering west, we're talking about tactics that was given down to him through his father, through Hannibal, and was actually holding it down for us, the Carthaginians, who was mainly based over here, but had a connection in what is now called Morocco over there, the kingdom of Morocco over there, which then means the Carthaginians, Hannibal, was a Moor, which is why he went up into Sicily and Spain, because that's where Moors always go. That's where Moors been going. You know what I'm saying? We've been going there. I think we are to be wherever we are, but I think the foundation of being a Muslim or being a Moor is understanding the will of Allah. Not Allah in the traditional sense of what is spouted and you would one time chain to. Like they used to chain Moors to the Quran to learn and recite it, but they didn't have it. They didn't have a means of preserving that system because of all of the wars. Started converting a lot of those Moors, those children, to Christianity. So essentially they became a system of brutalized control of people's ideology and what it meant to be a real Moor. So, like I said, it's all about what you say it is. And that becomes a system of denial, you know, where we all become caught up, right? And we will all become caught up in what we wish we would have known when we had a chance to, but we was on some other shit. But we could only be where we at now, you know what I mean? So I think the foundation of us being who we are is to accept Allah as evidence of God in the physical form or flesh manifest, but the divine spirit that we, the species mind pattern, all give life to and manifest now. So as a Moor or Muslim, I can read the Rig Veda like I would read the Quran. You know what I'm saying? Or I would read the Bible the way a Moor would read the Bible, not the way a Christian preacher would. You see what I'm saying? I'm reading it for what it really is, which is Moorally, to understand the unlocking of things from even the way that you were supposed to read it. Moors read the Bible from Revelation to Genesis. Christians read the Bible from Genesis to Revelation. You know what I'm saying? But in that, I bear witness to Isa. I bear witness to Zoroaster. I bear witness to Confucius. I bear witness to all of these people as being Moors. Therefore, if they were bays and eels, then that means that we are on the level that they was on when they brought this forth for all of these world religions to jump onto. So as opposed to me being under any one of these religions, I'm going to understand it for what it really is and manifest it for what it is for me today, not make myself a slave to it. Therefore, I'm now functioning within the ecclesiastical government of the Most High, which is the House of Light, which is the family of light, which is the Bayit Eel, or the Bays and the Eel. One or the other. You know what I'm saying? Unless one marries the other. Because that's how it is. You know what I mean? So, you know, I know Moors that were Buddhists. Like C. Freeman L. practiced yoga. He practiced Buddhism. He practiced tantric healing. He practiced all of that blessed day. But he was still a Moor. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like he was doing yoga on some, oh, I'm an Indian now. No, he was doing it like a Moor was doing it. Therefore, the Indians looking at him like, oh, the Moor's doing it now. Same way I be seeing them look at Selena. Like, it's one thing to talk about, you know, being in the breath and all that, but it's another thing to watch somebody who actually puts themselves in a position to really breathe, in positions that most people would pass out in. And to watch somebody do it over the years, you see what I'm saying? To get it to such a level of control where she could still break through into levels of it. But people would watch the tape and ordered it from her, watch the tape, have called and talked about how their back has been healed and how their legs is working and stuff. Like, real talk. However, you know, she is who she is. So her journey has been what a lot of original Moabite women journey have been, which is hating on anybody that's coming in a darker complexion. To the point now even white people talking about it on TV. How come there's no dark-skinned people mainstream television or on real shows like that? Or when they are, they're only with white men. This is what white people are asking now. Black people ain't asking that because they feel if they ask that, they won't get no job. But that's why they only get them jobs, because they don't ask. It's crazy. Again, anybody that wants to holler at us about any form of national correspondence or national identity, hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com. We want to definitely go out on a high note. Tomorrow's still working. So, again, anybody that wants to hit us up with that can do so at houseofl@hotmail.com. You can also check out some of the shows, the older shows on Blog Talk, hopefully still. If not, you could also check on YouTube. Thank to Brother Deck. We'll be putting them up after we do them. Peace to you, homie. And trying to think if there's anything else. Yeah, you can check out cookingmorewithless.com, www.cookingmorewithless.com, www.darkskull418.com, www.aseer.thedukeoftears.com. And, again, definitely keep the prophet out front, man. Don't let these lames try to make you think that this dude was something that he wasn't. Go within, read the text for yourself. You know what I'm saying? The same way they be doing their little rituals and having they mentor's picture around, have his picture around, and do the knowledge. And see for yourself. Read it. Read it with the open mouth perspective, because then once you read it like that, you're able to read everything else. The same way if you came in through Supreme Math or Supreme Alphabet, you rose to the top of anything else you got into after that spiritually. It's the same way you'll get into it like that with the prophet. And don't be scared to be in your Moorish habit. And again, strive to get with as real temple as possible for those people that want to get with us down here, Ecclesiastical District Number 3, Home Office, in Al-Andalusia, that we call the Florida Dominions. You can hit me up at houseofl@hotmail.com, and we'll definitely build with you on where you are and, inshallah, how we can help you repatriate back to what you've always been. So with that, we want to say peace, love, and light. Thank you guys for holding us down, and thank the ancestors, the great God, and the gods for allowing a clearer broadcast than we had last week. But with that, like I said, also anybody wants to get in on our Wednesday classes as well as our Sunday school classes, hit me up at House of L. As well for any lectures, book signings, workshops, baptismals, anything like that. Holler at your boy. Islam.